Alright, welcome back, and now let's take this to a next level. So right now we are having nParticles, and we have already filled these nParticles with the help of the fill object. And before I start playing my timeline, let me first check some few attributes. First, we are required to have a ground plane to sustain the reaction, and let's also increase the substeps to a value of 10 and increase the max collision iterations to somewhere around 6. With the help of these, we can simply assure that we are having more qualities. More substeps simply means more quality checks and better realism, since for this effect we are totally relying upon the limited attributes which Maya is offering. But that really doesn't mean that you can but it really doesn't mean that you cannot use the expressions and all. It just simply depends upon the productivity of the artist. But for the entire effect, I would like to use the limited values and the attributes, and with the help of these only we can still able to create a very nice and interesting effect. So let's go inside the end particle shape, and let's also enable the self collide. Now without any change, I first would like to change the color. Yes, definitely, this is very important. Let's give a value of little brown. Let's also increase some few more color entry list and give some dark brown with this, followed by a little desaturated color, and this one I can have some more light color, and change the color input to the randomize ID and take it to somewhere like this. Just get rid of this value, and I think so is quite good. You can simply opt for the color you want, and let's make this a little bit more or less, and that is something fine, no problem. Alright, so we are almost done. Yes, that's fine. Okay, now I would like to change the values of the friction and stickiness, but let's do one thing. Let's just play and see what we have. So without any friction and stickiness, we would like to see where exactly the particles are moving, and we can simply see that particles are moving way beyond. These are simply trying to get separate from each other, and they are covering a lot of distance. So this is just because we don't have appropriate friction and the stickiness. So let's do one thing. Let's introduce these two very important stuff, that is the friction and the stickiness. So let me increase the value of stickiness and the friction to a value of 1 and 1. And now if I play the timeline, you'll notice very clearly that the particles will not try to move away from each other, and they just try to stick them around. So this is the beauty of the stickiness and the friction. Alright, and yes, definitely we are going to use these two attributes heavily for the rest of the effect. And let's also increase the max self collide iterations to a value of 6. Alright, now the important thing is to introduce a passive filter upon which these particles can simply react. Let's adjust this, and I think so this is still a bit high, so we can adjust this, no problem. Let me scale this up, and here we go. That's fine. Go inside the enclose and use the option create passive collider. Make sure we have the same nucleus. Hit the option make collide, and we can also provide some interesting friction as well as the stickiness. Alright, now if I play the timeline, you'll see very nice overall reaction of the particles. The particles are simply trying to stick with the passive collider, and the rest of the particles are simply scattered on the ground. So this is also a kind of an effect, but in this case I can clearly notice that all the particles are completely scattered. What if I just want to maintain some clustering, or you can say the clumping of the particles? So in that case, the responsibility of constraint comes. So nConstraints are simply a process of restraining, or you can say limiting, the overall simulations of our particle, but with a positive sense, because nConstraints are also enabling us to use the particle cluster and clumping of particles. So without this, it cannot be possible. So to create an effect of particle clustering or clumping, I'm using the component to component constraint. And yeah, that's very important, that whether I want to use the constraints on all the particles or on some limited or the selected particles. So right now I like to go with some limited and the selected particles, because this will create a very nice and interesting subtlety inside our scene. Use sets and hit the option create constraint. The moment you create this, you can actually see the areas of influence where the constraint is actually present. So if I just go inside this, you'll see that the overall range of the constraints is actually very less, because the method is the nearest pair. So instead of using the nearest pair, I like to go with the within max distance. So this will try searching the particles, and this is the max distance, that means 0.1 centimeter, which is obviously very less. So let me increase the value to 0.35 and take you close. So this is basically the networking of the constraints. Right now all these particles, the selected particles, are clustered, or you can say constrained with one another. So let's do one thing without having any changes inside this. Let me play the timeline and show you the wonderful change we have, and this will definitely going to result us in the overall clustering of the particles. And here we go, something really very nice. And you can also observe that particular section of the particle, and look at this, first of all, very very nice. And some particular section of the particles is still sticking with this. This is due to, yes, I can tell you, this is actually due to the tangent strength we have in this particular effect. While using the constraint, there are actually four important attributes which are really very important, and I'm going to use only these four to create an effect of a dry sand: the strength, tangent strength, glue strength, and the max distance. Alright, so let's do one thing. Let's take a pause from this clip, and I'd like to continue this topic in the next clip, where I will explore these three important attributes. Alright, so see you there in the next clip.